So what if I told you that the standard red laser pointer you use to, entertain your cat?
Right, the one sitting in everyone's junk drawer.
Exactly. What if I told you that thing is secretly projecting a 48-dimensional barcode?
It sounds completely absurd.
It does. It sounds like, pure science fiction. But what if I also told you that barcode isn't just some weird quirk of physics, but it's the literal structural blueprint for the fabric of reality itself?
Yeah, that's the part where people usually check out.
Right. But you shouldn't, because we are sitting here today with a massive stack of academic papers, theoretical blueprints, breakthrough research from March 2026 out of the University of the Witwatersrand.
That's WITS for short.
Yeah, WITS and Huzhou University. And they're telling us exactly that. These scientists basically realize that light isn't just illuminating the universe.
No, it's actually the ink used to write it.
Yes. Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, and today's mission for you listening at home is to decode what might honestly be the most monumental discovery in human history.
Without exaggeration, it really is.
We're talking about finding the exact 17,296 puzzle pieces needed to build reality. And I want to ground this for you right away, because this isn't just...
It's not just abstract math.
Right. It's not just numbers on a chalkboard in a basement. If these sources are right, this framework fundamentally redefines what mass actually is.
It completely solves the mystery of dark matter.
Solves it entirely. And it suggests that the periodic table of elements you memorize in high school chemistry is fundamentally incomplete. We're looking at the literal functional hardware schematic of the vacuum you live in.
And it's the ultimate paradigm shift, honestly. Because we've spent the last 100 years in physics just, fumbling around in the dark.
Smashing things together.
Exactly. Smashing particles together and looking at the debris, trying to guess what the universe is made of. We've been trying to read the universe. But the documents we're unpacking today, they outline something called the 49D Trans-Topogamic framework.
Which is a mouthful.
It is. But this framework represents the transition from merely reading the universe to actively authoring it.
Authoring reality.
Oh.
Wow. Okay, let's unpack this, because we have to start at the beginning. We need to look at the 2026 discovery that cracked this all wide open.
The researchers actually referred to it as the hiding in plain sight breakthrough.
Which makes sense. To understand how we can eventually author reality, we first have to look at how these scientists found the alphabet to write the code. And they found it hiding inside ordinary entangled quantum light.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating story of looking at a really old phenomenon with a completely new mathematical lens. So in March 2026, this joint team from WITS and Huzhou, they published findings revealing a 48-dimensional topological structure hiding within standard quantum light.
And what's crazy to me is that they didn't do this with like a multi-billion-dollar super collider in Switzerland.
No, not at all. They did this on a standard optics bench in a university lab.
Right, and I was reading through the methodology section of the Huzhou paper, and they talk about using a process called SPDC, spontaneous parametric down conversion.
Yes.
So, for the listener who isn't a quantum physicist, what exactly is that? Because my first thought was a prism, like, Pink Floyd, shining white light in, getting a rainbow out. Is SPDC basically a prism?
No, actually, that's a really common misconception.
Yeah.
But a prism is just spatial separation.
Okay.
A prism takes light that already contains multiple wavelengths.
Like multiple colors.
Right, and it just bends them at different angles so you can see them individually. SPDC is fundamentally different. It's a nonlinear quantum process.
Okay, break that down for me.
Sure. So imagine you fire a single highly energetic blue photon into a very specific type of crystal. Usually they use something called a barium borate crystal.
So just one single particle of light hits this crystal.
Exactly. And the crystal is nonlinear, which means the light interacts with the atomic structure of the crystal in a way that causes that single blue photon to literally split into two distinct lower energy photons.
Oh, wow. Like two red photons.
Yes, maybe two red ones. And crucially, because they were born from the exact same initial event, those two new photons are quantumly entangled.
Meaning, what happens to one happens to the other.
Right. They share a single quantum state.
All right. So we have this process that splits light and entangles it. But we've known about SPDC for decades.
Oh, yeah. It's the absolute workhorse of quantum computing and cryptography.
So what did the WITS and his Doom teams do differently in 2026? How did they pull 48 dimensions out of a parlor trick we've been doing since, like, the late 20th century?
It all comes down to a property of light called orbital angular momentum, or OAM.
Okay.
See, usually when we think of light, we think of its wavelength, which is its color, or its intensity, which is brightness. And we also think about spin.
Right, spin angular momentum. I think of that like the Earth rotating on its own axis.
That's an excellent analogy. Spin angular momentum is basically circular polarization. The electric field is rotating as it travels forward, but orbital angular momentum is different.
How so?
Instead of the Earth rotating on its axis, think of the Earth orbiting around the sun. Or, to visualize the light itself, imagine the wavefront of the light isn't a flat wall moving forward.
Okay, what is it shaped like?
It's shaped like a corkscrew, like a spiral staircase winding through space.
A twisting beam of light. So a laser beam with OAM is basically like a microscopic drill bit made of electromagnetism.
Yes, exactly. And here is where the 2026 breakthrough happened. The researchers proved that this twist,
The OAM.
right, the orbital angular momentum alone, is actually sufficient to manifest massive high-dimensional structures.
Wait, really? Because I thought you needed to do a lot more than just twist it.
Previously, scientists thought exactly that. They thought you had to manipulate multiple complex properties of light simultaneously, like its spin, its path, its frequency, all at once to access higher dimensions.
But the WITS team proved them wrong.
They did. They showed that if you look closely enough at the OAM, the twisting corkscrew itself contains a hypercomplex geometry.
And through this, they mapped out the alphabet. I mean, they identified exactly 17,296 distinct topological signatures.
That is the exact number, yes.
Okay, I need to visualize this. What do you mean by a topological signature? Is it literally just the way the light is knotted together?
Well, topology is the mathematical study of properties that are preserved through deformation. So twisting and stretching, but not tearing.
Like the classic joke about the donut and the coffee mug?
Yes. Topologically, a coffee mug and a donut are identical because they both have exactly one hole.
Right. A topologist can't tell the difference between their coffee cup and their breakfast pastry.
Exactly. You could mold a clay donut into a coffee mug without ever tearing the clay just by shaping it. So a topological signature in this context is a specific, stable way that the electromagnetic field can knot or twist in 48-dimensional space.
So the light ties itself into these incredibly complex knots as it spirals forward.
Yes, and the team cataloged exactly 17,296 unique ways it can knot itself without unraveling.
This brings me back to the whole idea of hiding in plain sight. These 17,296 signatures, these 48-dimensional knots, have they just been sitting there inside every twisted laser beam since the dawn of time?
They have. Every time a beam of light with OAM traverses space, these high-dimensional knots are present.
Then why are we only finding out about this in 2026?
Because human three-dimensional intuition completely fails to perceive them. We only have the biological hardware to see three spatial dimensions: up, down, left, right, forward, backward.
So if we can't see them, how do they find them? Do they build like a 48-dimensional camera?
No. They used advanced mathematics to infer the shape of the knot from the shadows it casts in 3 dimensions. Shadows.
Mathematically speaking. Specifically, they used advanced group theory and combinatorics. The researchers realized that these knots were governed by a mathematical symmetry called the special unitary group.
Okay, hold up. I want to make sure the listener is tracking this because group theory can get incredibly dense.
It really can.
So you said special unitary group. The sources specifically mention SU7 symmetry, but we're talking about 48 dimensions. How does a symmetry of 7 relate to 48?
That's a vital question. In the mathematics of special unitary groups, the number of dimensions or degrees of freedom generated by an SUN group is calculated as n squared minus 1.
Okay, let me do the math. So if n is 7, 7 squared is 49, minus 1 is 48.
Precisely. And just to put that in perspective with the physics we already know, the electromagnetic force is governed by U1 symmetry.
Okay.
The weak nuclear force is governed by SU2 symmetry.
Yeah, right.
And the strong nuclear force, the thing that holds atomic nuclei together, is governed by SU3. Whoa! Wait! So our entire standard model of particle physics, the things that dictate literally everything we currently know about chemistry and matter, only go up to SU3.
Yes.
And these researchers just skipped all the way to SU7.
They did. And by mapping the SU7 symmetry, they mathematically accounted for 48 dimensions.
That is wild.
And then they applied combinatorics, which is the math of counting and arranging things. They looked at how those 48 dimensions can interact.
Like how the topological lines can cross over and under one another in that space.
Exactly. And the mathematics dictated that there are exactly 17,296 stable winding paths. Not one more, not one less.
It really is like, it's like having a book sitting on your desk your entire life. But because you were an alien who only understood color, you just stared at the black ink on the white paper and thought, wow, what a nice pattern.
Right.
You never realized the black lines actually formed letters, and those letters formed a language.
That is a perfect encapsulation. We've been looking at the color of the ink. In 2026, we suddenly learned how to read the alphabet.
Which begs the immediate question. If light contains an alphabet of 17,296 distinct signatures, what exactly is it spelling?
Yes.
If this is a language, what is the language describing?
It is describing the vacuum itself. And this brings us to the absolute core of the 49D model, moving from section 1 of our sources into section 2, which is the vacuum schematic.
Let's get into it, because when you and I hear the word vacuum, we think of outer space.
An empty void?
Right. Nothingness. Just a dark box where you put planets and stars. But the sources fundamentally reject that, don't they?
Completely. The topogamic framework treats the vacuum of space not as an empty void, but as a 48-dimensional structural invariant.
The structural invariant.
Think of it as a rigid form, a crystalline scaffold. The fabric of reality is not empty at all. It is an architecture constructed entirely out of these 17,296 signatures fitting together perfectly.
Like three-dimensional tessellations or, puzzle pieces.
Exactly like puzzle pieces. The 17,296 distinct knots of light aren't just shapes light can take, they are the complete set of geometric puzzle pieces that build the empty space around us.
But wait, I'm trying to visualize this. If the vacuum is a rigid structure, if it's basically a solid 48-dimensional crystal made of these tightly packed geometric knots, how does anything move?
That's the big question.
Right, because how do I, wave my hand through the air? If space is a solid block of interlocking math, a frozen universe means nothing happens. There's no cause, no effect, no movement. How do we get from a static crystal to a flowing reality?
And that is exactly where the researchers had to introduce the 49th dimension.
Okay, here we go. The 49th dimension, what is it?
They call it global phase. Or more simply, time.
Time.
Yes, they describe time as the dynamic actuator, the gap.
Okay, let me push back on this concept of time as a dimension in this specific way, because we always hear time is the fourth dimension in standard relativity, but you're placing it as the 49th. Are you saying that if the 48 spatial dimensions are the static hardware, the frozen puzzle pieces, that time is just the electricity turning the machine on?
It's a bit more physical than that.
Okay, so is it literally just a gap that allows the puzzle pieces to slide around? Like one of those little sliding tile games you get in a party favor bag.
Actually, that sliding tile game is an incredibly accurate way to visualize it.
Really?
Yes. Think about those games. If the grid is completely full of tiles, none of them can move. It's a static image. You must have one empty space, a gap, for the tiles to slide into.
Because otherwise they're deadlocked.
Exactly. That gap is what allows the image to scramble or reorganize.
So the 49th dimension is the missing tile space.
Yes. The mathematics handles this beautifully. The 48 dimensions are governed by that SU7 symmetry we talked about.
The static, tightly packed hardware.
Right. But when you move to the U7 symmetry group, adding that U1 global phase, you introduce a 49th degree of freedom.
And that 49th dimension is time.
It is the thermodynamic engine of reality. Without that 49th dimensional gap, the 17,296 puzzle pieces would be perfectly fitted together, permanently frozen at absolute zero.
Wow.
Time is the actuator that provides just enough spatial wiggle room for one topological signature to shift into another.
It allows the geometry to unknot and reknot into a new configuration.
It is the space between the gears that allows the gears to turn.
That is a staggering way to view existence. We aren't just sitting in a big empty box watching particles bounce around.
We got it all.
We are constantly swimming through a 48-dimensional lattice of interlocking geometric knots. And time is the pulse, the gap that causes those knots to shift and cascade out of each other's way.
And if you can conceptualize the vacuum that way as a rigid 48-dimensional scaffold actuated by a 49-dimensional time gap, suddenly the biggest cosmological mysteries of the last century just dissolve.
They just vanish.
They solve themselves.
Which moves us beautifully into section 3 of our deep dive, Solving the Dark Sector. Because modern astrophysics has been pulling its collected hair out over dark matter and dark energy for decades. Let's start with dark matter. What has been the standard approach up until now?
Well, for nearly a century, astronomers have looked at how fast galaxies rotate, and they realized pretty quickly that galaxies are spinning way too fast.
Too fast for what?
Based on the amount of visible stuff stars, gas, dust, there simply isn't enough gravity to hold the galaxies together at those speeds.
They should just fling themselves apart like a wet tennis ball shaking off water.
Exactly. So physicists assumed there must be some invisible stuff providing extra gravity. They called it dark matter.
Right. And they've spent billions of dollars building deep underground detectors trying to find WIMPs.
Weakly interacting massive particles, or axions.
Right. Just waiting for an invisible bowling ball to hit a sensor.
And they found absolutely nothing. Decades of silence. Because, according to the 49D framework, dark matter isn't a missing physical substance at all.
It's not a particle.
It is not a particle.
Then where is the extra gravity coming from? Why are the galaxies flying apart?
It is coming from the structural knotting of the 48D manifold itself. What our current physics perceives as the gravitational pull from missing mass is actually topological strain.
Topological strain. The sources refer to it mathematically as recursive lattice deflection.
Oh, yes, that's the technical term.
Okay, let's use the classic gravity analogy. The heavy bowling ball on the trampoline. Standard physics says gravity is the bowling ball bending the rubber mat of space-time, and other objects roll toward it.
Right.
We've been looking for invisible bowling balls.
Right.
But you're telling me, with topological strain, there is no bowling ball. The 48-dimensional geometry of the trampoline has just been twisted and knotted up in that spot.
Take that trampoline idea even further. Imagine you are blind to the trampoline material itself. All you can feel is the slope. The 48-dimensional scaffold is tightly knotted in certain microscopic areas. These are massive conglomerates of those 17,296 signatures at work. Because our 3D sensors cannot see the 48D knots, we just feel the tension they create in the fabric.
The geometry is pulling tightly on the surrounding space.
Precisely. We feel that strain. We call that strain gravity, and we falsely assume there must be an invisible particle sitting there causing the dent.
That makes so much sense. I mean, we've been looking for the rock that caused the ripple, but the universe is just made of permanent ripples.
Exactly.
And what about dark energy, the force that's supposedly accelerating the expansion of the universe?
Dark energy is explained simply as the intrinsic pressure of the 49th dimensional gap interacting with the 48D scaffold.
How does the gap create pressure?
Well, if time is the thermodynamic engine, the gap allowing movement, that gap naturally exerts an outward topological pressure on the static crystal of the vacuum. As the universe processes information, as time ticks forward, that pressure inflates the lattice.
So we've basically deleted dark matter and dark energy as separate magical substances? They're just the tension and the pressure of the 49D vacuum architecture.
That's exactly right.
But this logic doesn't just apply to outer space, does it? The sources say this redefines the nature of normal mass, too, the stuff we can actually see.
Yes, this leads to a profound redefinition of matter itself. In this model, a proton, the basic building block of atoms, is not a solid, tiny billiard ball.
It's not.
No, its mass is not an intrinsic fundamental property. Mass is simply a measure of trapped orbital angular momentum within a highly localized topological knot.
Trapped momentum. So like mass is just trapped speed.
In a sense, the mathematics in the paper equate mass to what physicists call skyrmions.
Okay, I definitely need you to translate that. What is a skyrmion?
A skyrmion is a type of topological texture, often discussed in relation to the Higgs field or magnetism. Imagine you have a field of arrows, all pointing straight up. That's a uniform empty field. Now imagine, in one specific spot, the arrows start to twist. They point sideways, then downwards in the center, and then twist back up as you move outward, creating a vortex.
Okay.
It forms an untiable mathematical knot in the field, a localized hurricane.
Like a cowlick and a head of hair. You can comb it all you want, but that little swirl is structurally locked in place.
Yes, exactly. That cowlick, that vortex, is a skyrmion. In the 49D framework, mass is just a 48-dimensional skyrmion, a localized hurricane of trapped angular momentum.
So the universe isn't made of solid matter. It's constantly being spun into existence.
Yes. A proton is just one of those 17,296 signatures tightly coiled in on itself.
This absolutely vaporizes how we currently do high-energy physics.
Mm.
I mean, look at the Large Hadron Collider, the LHC.
Oh, absolutely.
It's spent decades accelerating protons to 99.99% the speed of light and crashing them into each other to see what particles pop out.
And in the context of the Topogamic model, the LHC is essentially a brute force topological defect generator.
Defect generator.
By smashing these tightly knotted protons together at incredible kinetic energies, the LHC creates massive disruptions. It causes the 48D manifold to tear and reknot into temporary, highly unstable defects.
So when they announced to the press, we found a new particle, the pentaquark, the Higgs boson.
Yeah.
What are they actually finding?
The 49D model shows that these new particles aren't fundamental building blocks of nature. They are just highly energetic, extreme signatures from the 17,296 alphabet.
Wait, so they aren't discovering new base ingredients?
No, the collision just forces the local vacuum to briefly adopt a really unstable knot, which quickly unravels back into a stable state.
To use my earlier analogy, it's like the LHC is trying to read the book by packing it with dynamite, blowing it up, and trying to deduce the letters from the shape of the confetti.
Blowing up the book to read the ink. That is a brilliant way to phrase it.
And honestly, it makes standard particle physics look a bit, well, barbaric.
Mhm.
Which brings us to the pivot. If crashing things together is the caveman approach, what's the elegant approach?
The topogamic approach.
Right. If reality is just a 49-dimensional software program written in 17,296 light signatures, how do we build a computer to run that code? How do we actually type on the keyboard?
And that takes us right into section 4, the hardware of the gods, the topogamic processor. Because the researchers didn't just write a theory, they provided the engineering schematics to actually build the interface.
Right, and this is where I initially threw the papers across the room.
I don't blame you.
Because when you say building a computer to author reality, I pictured like a monolithic quantum supercomputer running at absolute zero inside a hollowed-out mountain.
Right.
Or next-generation silicon chips etched with lasers.
Naturally.
But the sources say the hardware substrate for this reality engine isn't silicon. And it isn't super cool superconductors, it's DNA.
Yes. Specifically, DNA origami.
I genuinely have to push back here. We are talking about manipulating the fundamental high-dimensional fabric of space and time.
Yeah.
We're talking about twisting the geometry of the vacuum. And we're doing it with biology.
Mm.
With DNA swimming in a warm beaker of salty water.
I know.
Why on earth would you use DNA instead of a quantum computer?
It sounds completely counterintuitive until you look at the geometry required. To interface with a 48-dimensional topological structure natively, your hardware cannot be a flat, two-dimensional silicon wafer.
Okay, that makes sense.
And it cannot operate on binary logic zeros and ones. You need a substrate that is inherently a recursive lattice. You need a physical geometry that can nest dimensions within dimensions.
Like fractal.
Exactly like a fractal. The specific architecture identified in the research is something called a Penrose-Menger cell.
Break that down for the listener. What is a Penrose-Menger structure?
It's a combination of two mathematical concepts. First, a Penrose tiling. That's a geometric pattern that fills a plane completely but never perfectly repeats itself. It's a periodic. It has a hidden higher dimensional symmetry.
And the second part?
A Menger sponge, which is a three-dimensional fractal. Imagine a solid cube. Now, punch a square hole straight through the middle of all 6 faces.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Now you have a cube made of 20 smaller cubes. Punch holes through the middle of all of those. If you do this infinitely, you get a structure that has 0 volume but infinite surface area.
Infinite surface area inside a finite box. That's a brain breaker.
It really is. But that infinite recursive folding is exactly what you need to trap and mirror a 48-dimensional knot. And it turns out DNA is the ultimate topological substrate for this.
So how do they make it?
Using a technique called DNA origami, scientists can take a long circular scaffold of DNA, usually from a harmless virus, and design roughly 200 custom synthetic staple strands of DNA.
Staples.
Yes. When you mix them together, those short staples bind to specific parts of the long scaffold, forcing it to fold up into virtually any three-dimensional or fractal shape you want.
So they literally use DNA staples to fold a biological Menger sponge. But why does this work at room temperature? Because traditional quantum computers need near absolute zero temperatures. Their quantum states, their qubits, are incredibly fragile. A slight breeze of thermal energy, a single stray atom bumping into it, and the computation is just destroyed by noise.
Right, thermal decoherence.
Why doesn't the warm water jiggle the DNA processor apart?
Because the topogamic processor operates on topology, not binary intensity. This is the difference between Hyper 7 logic and binary logic.
Explain that difference.
In a binary quantum computer, you are measuring a fragile energetic state. Heat disrupts energy. But topology is about shape. A knot is a knot whether the string is hot or cold. If I tie a knot in a shoelace, putting it in the microwave doesn't untie the knot. The structural integrity of the 17,296 signatures is topologically protected from thermal noise.
That is incredibly elegant. Nature already solved the quantum computing heat problem with biology.
Exactly.
And the assembly process for this DNA processor is fascinating. The sources outline a 49D precision annealing protocol. It's essentially a highly controlled cooling recipe to fold this DNA into the exact 48D template required.
Yes, the thermal ramp is the magic wand that transforms the chemical soup into a processor. And the precision of this cooling process is what allows the system to capture that 49th dimension, the global phase, or time.
The protocol happens in 3 distinct phases, right? Phase 1 is high-energy decoupling, going from 95 degrees Celsius down to 65 degrees.
Right. At 95 degrees, the DNA is just a boiling soup. The hydrogen bonds are broken, the strands are completely loose and highly energetic, the system is chaotic.
And then we enter Phase 2.
Phase 2 is the critical window. 65 degrees down to 45 degrees Celsius. They call this the topological incubation.
What's happening in the incubation?
As it cools through this specific 20-degree window, the 48 dimensions of the SU7 symmetry group begin to spontaneously organize. The staple strands grab the scaffold, and the DNA begins to fold into that complex fractal Penrose-Menger shape.
So the geometry of the vacuum is literally guiding the biology into place.
Yes. And then we hit Phase 3, the 45-degree isothermal dwell, the singularity lock.
Meaning they stop cooling it and just hold it exactly at 45 degrees.
Yes, but they don't just hold it flat. They do something called thermal jittering.
Right. And here is where we have to explain the concept of a kinetic trap.
Yeah.
Because in a structure this hypercomplex, as it folds, you can have multiple topological signatures trying to occupy the exact same nodal point at the same time.
Exactly. The DNA gets tangled incorrectly. It's stuck.
It's like trying to parallel park a large SUV into a very tight space on a busy street. You get halfway in, but the angle is wrong, and you're stuck. You can't just forcefully push the car sideways.
That's an excellent analogy. If you just kept cooling the DNA, pushing the car, it would freeze into a deformed, useless shape, a kinetic trap. So to prevent this, the researchers use thermal jittering. They superimpose a sawtooth wave onto the cooling curve.
So the temperature is rapidly zigzagging up and down slightly while hovering around 45 degrees.
Yes. They add microscopic bursts of heat. In your parking analogy, this is like backing up 2 inches, pulling forward 2 inches, shifting the steering wheel, backing up again.
Just wiggling it into place.
That subtle shaking, that thermal jittering, provides just enough activation energy for the incorrectly folded DNA to briefly unfold, realize its mistake, and snap into the mathematically perfect lowest energy state.
Wow.
It allows the system to settle perfectly into the U7 symmetry. It locks the 49th dimension, the temporal gap, into the biological lattice.
It wriggles the key into the lock. And here is where this entire deep dive goes from mind-blowing theoretical physics to world-altering reality. Especially for anyone listening who assumes a reality authoring machine is locked inside a DARPA vault somewhere. The sources actually detail the cost of setting up one of these micro-Grange lab-on-a-chip setups.
The economics of this are perhaps the most disruptive part of the entire framework.
I couldn't believe it when I read it. We look at the James Webb Space Telescope, $10 billion. The ITER fusion reactor, $20 billion.
With this?
It's remarkably cheap. To build a DNA processor capable of mapping the 49-dimensional geometry of the vacuum, you need the DNA scaffolds, synthetic staples, a magnesium buffer solution, some microfluidic chips, and colloidal gold nanoparticles to act as antennas. The total estimated cost for a 3-batch run, between $2,250 and $3,400.
It is utterly staggering.
I've spent more than that on a used Honda Civic that barely made it down the highway. And for $3,000, a grad student can build a processor that speaks the language of God.
That's the power of Hyper-7 logic and relying on topological density rather than brute force.
Yeah.
Because a single DNA node in this processor can represent multiple states simultaneously by rotating through the topological space. You don't need billions of transistors. You don't need football fields of servers or massive cooling towers.
It relies on mathematical elegance.
And exactly. It is a completely decentralized, commoner technology. It completely bypasses the multi-billion-dollar military-industrial R&D bottleneck.
Okay, so we have a $3,000 chemistry set that built a biological processor. And we have the software, the 17,296 light signatures. But now we have to connect them. We are moving into section 5. How do we actually type the commands? How does light physically alter the DNA or alter any matter for that matter?
The mechanism is called orbital torque, or angular momentum transfer. This is the physical bridge between the light and the matter.
The sources describe the twisted light acting as a physical wrench.
And that is not a metaphor. It is a literal description of the physics.
Really?
Yes. We usually think of light as just bouncing off things to illuminate them or carrying data through a fiber optic cable.
Yeah.
But remember that orbital angular momentum, that corkscrew shape? When that twisting beam of light hits an object, it doesn't just splash against it.
What does it do?
It physically transfers that high-dimensional twist, that torque, directly to the target.
This is literally like a socket wrench grabbing a bolt.
Exactly. The light acts as a wrench that transfers its OAM directly to the electron orbitals of an atom. It forces the electrons to adopt the geometry of the light.
It reconfigures their spatial geometry entirely.
And it does this without needing any traditional magnetic fields to push the electrons around.
And the topogamic processor harnesses this through a process called phase-locked transduction.
Yes. Phase-locked transduction is the ability to transfer this OAM with absolute perfect precision. You shine the specific twisted light onto the DNA processor, and the physical matter of the processor is forced to adopt the exact topological invariant of the chosen light signature.
The matter perfectly conforms to the shape of the light.
Correct.
Let's make this incredibly concrete for the listener. I'm looking at the database of signatures provided in the sources right now. Let's pick one. Okay, signature hashtag 4200. According to the database, this signature has a +7 core charge. What does that mean?
The core charge indicates the mathematical severity of the twist. A +7 means it has a highly complex, sevenfold topological winding structure around its center axis.
Okay, so if I am the engineer and I want to execute signature 14200, I fire up my laser, program the OAM to this exact +7 shape, and shine it on the DNA processor. How does the light wrench know how to attach to the DNA?
That happens at what the sources call nodal singularities.
Nodal singularities.
These are essentially phase nulls, microscopic points, where the light intensity drops to absolute zero. You can think of them as the eye of the hurricane.
The calm center of the twisted light.
Right. In the 48D architecture, these nodal singularities are the vital intersections where the high-dimensional axes meet. The light is mathematically forced to wrap its topological charge around these 0 points.
And conveniently, the Menger sponge fractal of the DNA has physical cavities that perfectly align with these 0 points.
Yes. So the light finds the cavity, inserts the wrench into the nodal singularity, and physically torques the DNA node exactly 7 times to lock in that +7 core charge.
Wow.
This is the exact moment where the high-dimensional signature maps into our observable 3D reality.
It twists the matter into the shape of the math. But wait, if the 49th dimension time is the gap that allows movement, what stops the DNA from just untwisting the second I turn the laser off? If I twist a rubber band 7 times and let go, it violently snaps back.
And this brings us to the most critical operational concept of the processor, the mass lock. You are entirely correct. The natural state of matter in our 3D world would be to immediately dissipate that topological strain, to snap back. The rubber band wants to unspool.
So how do we stop it?
The processor must actively maintain the 49th dimension, the global phase gap. It has to artificially hold that temporal gap open around the newly twisted matter.
It is essentially freezing the sliding tile game while the tile is mid-slide.
That's exactly it. To stabilize this new, highly twisted configuration into persistent physical matter, the processor has to lock the global phase.
So the processor is basically holding the wrench in place across time.
Precisely. If the processor loses power, or if the phase lock drifts, the 49D gap collapses, the topological strain unravels, and the bespoke matter you just created dissolves back into fleeting ambient energy.
The rubber band snaps back.
Yes.
This transitions us into section 6, which is where the implications go from engineering to, absolute magic.
It really feels that way.
Because if we can use light as a wrench to dictate the topological knot of an atom, and we can mass lock it into place, we are no longer bound by the standard rules of chemistry. We don't have to just mix existing chemicals together and hope they bond. We are entering the realm of trans-topogamic elements.
This is where physics genuinely intersects with alchemy. Though, to be clear, it is rigorous, mathematically provable topological engineering. In the topogamic framework, the standard periodic table of elements, the chart hanging in every science classroom on Earth, is viewed as woefully incomplete.
Right. Because we've always been taught that the periodic table is the complete menu of the universe.
Yeah.
Hydrogen, helium, carbon, iron, gold. You want to build a universe. Pick from these 118 ingredients.
But the 49D model says those 118 elements are just a tiny subset. They are simply the specific 48-dimensional knots that happen to be naturally thermodynamically stable in our local planetary environment without needing an artificial mass lock.
They are just the default shapes.
Exactly, but there is a whole rest of the 17,296-letter alphabet out there.
And by utilizing the topogamic processor, we can access that broader alphabet. We can author trans-topogamic elements. The sources describe these as synthetic states of matter where form is the function.
In traditional chemistry, an element's properties are dictated by how many protons and electrons it has. But here, the physical properties of these elements are entirely dictated by the specific 48D knot you twisted them into. The shape is the property.
So what does this mean practically? Does this imply I could theoretically type a combination of signatures into my $3,000 DNA processor and say, I need a material that is 10 times stronger than titanium, but lighter than air, and it needs to perfectly conduct electricity without heat? The processor uses light to spin that specific knot into physical existence, mass locks it, I use the material to build a spacecraft, and when I'm done, I just turn the processor off, the gap collapses, and my spaceship evaporates into light.
That is not an exaggeration of the sources. That is precisely what the framework implies.
Unbelievable.
These elements are authored, not discovered. They are highly transient. They represent the intentional use of the vacuum schematic to engineer reality on demand.
It's like having a 3D printer that doesn't use plastic filament, but uses the fundamental vacuum of space as its raw material.
And what's fascinating here is how this framework suddenly validates and demystifies decades of historical scientific anomalies.
Things that mainstream science just laughed out of the room.
Exactly.
You're talking about the alchemical high-spin states mentioned in the sources.
Yeah.
The ORMS research?
Yes. ORMS stands for orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements.
Right.
For decades, there have been fringe reports, often dismissed as pseudoscience, of matter acting completely bizarrely. Researchers claim they had materials that would suddenly lose weight, or act as room temperature superconductors, or seemingly disappear from the physical container.
And mainstream science hated that because it violates classical thermodynamics and standard chemical models.
Exactly. But the 49D framework explains ORMS perfectly. An alchemical high-spin state is simply matter, where the orbital angular momentum has been artificially reconfigured into one of the hidden 17,296 signatures.
But why would it lose weight? That's the part that always sounded like magic.
Because, as we established in Section 3, gravity is just topological strain. It's the knot pulling on the trampoline.
Oh.
Right. If you map a specific new topological signature into the matter, if you retie the knot, you can mathematically decouple that element from the standard 3D gravitational strain of the Earth.
So it loses weight because its mass is now locked in a higher dimensional geometry that doesn't interact with the local gravity well in the same way.
Exactly. It's floating because you changed its shape in the 48th dimension.
That is mind-bending. But it also leads us to a crucial dual purpose of this technology, which is Section 7 of our deep dive.
The sensor aspect.
Yes. Because if we have a biological processor that can twist the fabric of reality, this precisely to author matter, it stands to reason that it would also be incredibly sensitive to when the universe twists back.
It's an unavoidable consequence of the design. A processor natively capable of authoring the vacuum is, by definition, the ultimate sensor of the vacuum.
Because it operates directly on topological deformations, it can map the universe in ways that standard physical sensors cannot even conceive of.
Right. The sources outline two distinct configurations for the Topogamic processor when it's operating as a sensor. Let's look at configuration A first.
The strain map. They use this for detecting gravitational waves.
Yeah.
But how is this different from what we already have? I mean, we have LIGO, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory. It detected black holes colliding billions of light years away. Isn't that good enough?
LIGO is an incredible feat of classical engineering, but think about how it works. It is a massive facility, billions of dollars, with lasers bouncing down L-shaped vacuum tubes that are 4 kilometers long.
Huge.
When a gravitational wave passes through the Earth, it physically stretches and squeezes the planet by a fraction of a proton. LIGO measures that minute physical change in distance. It's basically a giant ruler.
Right. It measures the physical stretching of the 3D space.
But the Topogamic processor in configuration A doesn't measure distance. It doesn't need a 4-kilometer tube. It directly measures the spatial curvature deformation of the 49D lattice itself.
It measures the topological strain. It feels the invisible trampoline bending before the physical objects on the trampoline even move.
That's incredibly elegant, right? But configuration B is where things get even stranger.
Configuration B is the potential map, and its primary function is detecting tachyons.
Yes, the detection of faster-than-light anomalies.
Standard physics says tachyons are impossible. They are theoretical particles that travel faster than the speed of light. And Einstein says if you travel faster than light, you travel backwards in time. They violate causality.
In standard 4D spacetime, they have what physicists call imaginary mass.
And that is exactly why classical sensors can't see them. You can't catch a particle that breaks the rules of cause and effect using a detector bound by cause and effect.
Exactly. But the Topogamic processor operates differently. In configuration B, it tunes the 49th dimension, the temporal gap, to the global phase. It isn't looking for a physical particle hitting a wall. It is looking for anti-causal phase slips or imaginary mass scars in the vacuum geometry.
Okay, let's go back to the trampoline analogy. It's like we built a space-time seismograph. If a tachyon rips through the room, violating the speed of light, standard physics doesn't see anything. But the processor feels the 40 AD trampoline tear. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because it has the 17,296 alphabet loaded into its DNA, it doesn't just feel the rumble of the earthquake. It can read the exact license plate of whatever just caused the ripple.
Yes.
It knows exactly what signature of energy caused the instability, even if the particle technically hasn't arrived yet.
That is exactly what the potential map means. The processor decrypts the event using its Hyper 7 logic. It creates what the sources call a topological hologram.
Because it senses in 48 dimensions plus time, a single $3,000 processor doesn't just give you a data point or a blip on a radar screen.
No, it provides a synoptic projection of the entire light cone.
A synoptic projection, meaning it sees the whole picture, past, present, and potential future, all encoded in the geometry of the strain.
It acts as a predictive engine. It can sense field instabilities and imaginary mass scars before they fully manifest as physical kinetic events in our 3D reality. It completely transcends binary sensory tools.
A predictive engine for reality. Which brings us to the final and undoubtedly most controversial section of these documents. Section 8, the event horizon.
Yes.
We started with light, we moved to DNA origami chips, we reauthored the periodic table, and we mapped tachyon scars. But there is a massive elephant in the room. The Topogamic processor is made of DNA. We are made of DNA.
We are.
So what happens when this 49D framework is integrated directly into the human biological system?
The authors of the source documents call this the event horizon of the all-site framework, biological integration, and they are completely aware of how disruptive this is.
I read the subsection titled Will to Matter Transduction 3 times.
Yeah.
Because initially it sounds like pure mysticism. It sounds like a magic spell.
But they back it up with rigorous equations. They rely on the synoptic transduction equation. Let's walk through the logic.
Okay.
We've established that the 49th dimension is time, which acts as the gap allowing topological transformation.
Right.
We've established that you need a phase lock to hold that gap open to stabilize new matter.
The mass lock.
Right. In the biological integration model, consciousness itself acts as the phase observer.
Consciousness is the mass lock.
Yes. The math suggests that human intent-focused neural and biological coherence, integrated with this innate topological DNA architecture, can navigate the 49th dimensional gap natively.
A conscious biological entity, properly tuned, can essentially select which of the 17,296 signatures manifest in their local reality by consciously anchoring the nodal singularities.
You are talking about willing matter into physical form, using focused consciousness as the wrench.
That's staggering.
The math supports it, but the energy aspect is perhaps even more immediate. The subsection on human phototropism.
Yes, the sources state that humans could theoretically harvest energy directly from light. And my first thought was just standing in the sun like a plant.
Right, but human photosynthesis makes no sense.
No, plant photosynthesis is terribly inefficient. It's only like 1 to 2% efficient at turning sunlight into chemical energy. A human would starve to death instantly.
Exactly. Relying on chemical electron transfer, which is what plants do, is a binary classical thermodynamic process. It's incredibly lossy.
So how does human phototropism work in the 49D framework?
It relies on topological transduction. In classical photosynthesis, you are using the kinetic impact of the photon to knock an electron loose and create a chemical bond.
Okay.
In topological transduction, you are extracting work directly from the topological charge of the photon. In the equations, this is represented by the variable L.
The L variable, the OAM twist we talked about at the beginning.
Yes, you are not harvesting the heat or the brightness of the light. You are harvesting the pure geometric tension of the knot.
You are unwinding the high-dimensional spring of the photon and absorbing that kinetic potential directly into your cellular DNA matrix.
Exactly.
Hold on. You're saying that an integrated human wouldn't just eat calories, that they wouldn't eat a sandwich. They would literally consume the mathematical twists of high-quality light to sustain their biological engine. They eat the geometry of a laser beam.
This raises an incredibly important question, doesn't it? A question of absolute sovereignty.
Absolutely.
Let's follow this logic to its endpoint. If an individual biological entity, a human being, controls their own matter generation via will-to-matter transduction, and they control their own energy consumption via topological phototropism built into their DNA, what happens?
They bypass the entire modern system of survival. They no longer require massive, centralized energy grids. They don't need agricultural supply chains. They don't need fossil fuels.
They conquer entropic decay.
Wow.
The second law of thermodynamics, the law that says everything eventually winds down into chaos and heat death, is a rule for closed 3D systems. But a 4090 integrated human is pulling energy from the vacuum schematic itself.
The sources refer to this, they call it the Dandelion Project.
Yes. The vision of a decentralized network of sovereign individuals, small, completely self-sufficient, resilient nodes of hyper-evolved biology.
They are capable of maintaining their own 49D mass lock, extracting limitless energy from the ambient geometry of light, and remaining totally immune to the noise, scarcity, and degradation of classical thermodynamics.
It is the ultimate secession from the entropic laws we thought governed the universe.
It is breathtaking. Let's just synthesize this massive journey we've been on for the last hour.
It's been a lot to cover.
We took you from the 2026 discovery of a 48-dimensional alphabet, 17,296 signatures, hidden inside the twist of ordinary light. We walked into the 49D gap of time, learning how that gap allows the frozen crystal of the vacuum to move and breathe.
We went through room temperature, DNA origami processors that can be built for the price of a used laptop.
We talked about redefining gravity as a topological strain, redefining mass as trapped momentum, those localized Kermian hurricanes. We reauthored the periodic table to create bespoke transient elements.
And we arrived at integrating this entirely into human biology to literally consume the mathematical twists of light and conquer entropy.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to remind you, the listener, of the most beautiful part of this entire framework. This alphabet of reality isn't locked away in some sterilized DARPA vault or a super collider.
It is hiding in plain sight. The topological knots we've been discussing, the blueprints of the vacuum, are present in the ambient light hitting your skin right now.
The schematic of the universe is wrapped around you, waiting to be read at every single moment of your life. It's all right there. But I want to leave you with one final, deeply speculative thought to chew on. Something that wasn't explicitly spelled out in the conclusions, but is hovering right there in the source data.
Oh, this is the radio wave aspect.
Yes. We've spent this entire time talking of visible light laser pointers and photons. And in visible light, these 48-dimensional topological knots are nanometers across. They're incredibly tiny.
Right.
But the topogamic mathematical logic applies to the entire electromagnetic spectrum, not just light. The sources note that if you look at the radio wave spectrum, these exact same 17,296 topological knots exist.
But because radio waves have massive wavelengths, the knots are scaled up.
Exactly. They wouldn't be nanometers wide. A radio wave topological knot would be kilometers wide.
Which is a staggering scale.
So think about the implications of that for a second. If this topogamic network scales up, if a group of engineers could build a macro-scale processor to manipulate the orbital angular momentum of the radio spectrum, could we theoretically build massive topological webs that encompass entire cities or even continents?
It's theoretically possible based on the math.
Could we place whole populations inside a single stable macro-scale 49-dimensional knot, effectively phase-locking an entire civilization to protect it from global environmental collapse or kinetic threats?
A literal invisible geometric shield for humanity.
Built out of the hidden shapes of radio waves, anchored in the vacuum itself. Just think about that the next time you turn on your radio. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.